we are approaching the union budget as well.
Yeah.
What kind of AI relative measures and incentives do you expect from the budget?
So, I think one of the big things which we could do a little more in India is making a lot of data available publicly. So what is there is if you go and type a question and put a prompt, so the answers that you get are very Western. They're very much from a US or a European standpoint. And that reflects the fact that the training data which has been used is coming out of those sources. Now we have our own culture, we have our own languages, own nuances which are there. So I think if a lot of this data can be generated by the government and made available to the people who are developing LLMs, which can go into the local languages, or on simple things like there may be a religion, some religious thing which globally that they are not aware of, and they can give you a very different answer when somebody searches for that. So that is one area that will be of great interest which is there, if there is more data which is available. I think the second thing, which is partly related, partly unrelated, which I can highlight, is as these data centers come up in India, so we are going to require a lot of equipment. And it's not just the chips, it's also a lot of electrical equipment which is there, some of which doesn't get manufactured in India as of this point of time. So I think from a perspective of not being vulnerable and being resilient, if there are any steps which are there of driving manufacturing for those items, so that when we look at AI ecosystem as a whole, it's the data, it's the compute, it's the semiconductors, and also the other equipment which goes on, if we can cover that, then that would be really, really good which is there.
Mr. Gupta, India is going big on AI and compute capacity. The India AI mission aims to establish a 10,000 GPU compute capacity. From a policy standpoint, is this enough to make India a hub for sovereign AI, or should we be focusing more on incentivizing private sector data centers through the PLI?
So I think to answer your question, I think both things need to happen. You need to have adequate GPU capacity, which is there. And one of the objectives of also putting the GPU capacity is to make it affordable for researchers and startups and smaller businesses, so that it doesn't add to their cost at an early stage, where in any case you run a huge risk which is there. So that needs to happen. And data centers also need to come up. Now, you put one condition when you said, should the private data centers come up, which was on incentives through the PLIs. I think we have a situation basically which is there, where very large global players have announced plans to set up large data centers over here in India. So I think we seem to be in a good territory, good space, and there is a huge amount of investor interest which is there all over the world to set up this thing, data center capacity. So I think we should be quite all right.
Mr. Gupta, India has historically been the back office of the world when it comes to IT and tech. As an AI policy expert, what specific regulatory incentives and fiscal pivots are needed to ensure that India does not just remain implementation part of the world, but also builds the next generation of LLMs globally?
Yeah. So, in I think it was on November 10th that the government has come out with the new guidelines which are there for AI in India, which is on this issue of ethical AI and how it's to be regulated and all. So when I read those guidelines, I was very pleasantly surprised, I would say that, because unlike what has happened in EU, no new law has been proposed, no new regulation has been proposed, and it's basically relying on whatever are existing laws, whatever are existing regulations and institutions for them to govern. It's also a reflection of the fact that while a lot of people talk about the AI risks, and but it's a little conjectural in nature. So what type of risks would really play out or what may go wrong is not very clear as of this point of time. And that is why, as far as those guidelines were concerned, they talked about setting up of of a database where all these incidents can be recorded so that you have a better sense before you roll out regulations. So it was as I said, it was a very pleasant surprise, because what you're doing is you're letting the entrepreneurial energy to roll on. And I believe, in the last 10 years, India has fundamentally changed in the sense, when I was young, this type of venture capital or this type of equity was not available. So what you find is that you have a large number of entrepreneurs who are there, and if they have good businesses which have been implemented to some extent, then there is capital which is available. So I'd be much more optimistic this time around, which is there. And I think it's still early days. We don't have a mature industry, so we are not like in software, where you have a few players who dominate and who have the global scale, and it's very difficult to be able to build a scale. So I'd say we have a good chance, and I think the strategy of not interfering, of letting entrepreneurs do what they are doing and not getting too much caught out on the risks and what can go wrong and all, is exactly the strategy to follow. And don't tinker with this, is what I would say.
To help India match up and catch up with the global big names, the Indian government has allocated over rupees 10,000 crore to the India AI mission. Do you think it's enough when we compare it to the big billion-dollar investments that other countries are making?
Yeah, so, some of the US tech companies have talked about a few $1 billion being required to get a LLM going. And then you had this announcement which happened early last year from DeepSeek, and they have been able to develop a LLM at a much lower cost, which is there, and which is a reflection of the entrepreneurship which is there in that ecosystem which is there. Yeah, it will always help to have more allocations which are there, but I typically tend to be on the side that if you can incentivize entrepreneurship by not interfering, and if you have an ecosystem where you have the manpower and you have finance which is available, different types of risk capital which is there, then a lot of it is achievable. And you look at all these companies which have a valuation of more than $1 trillion today, they were all funded by VCs, each and every one of them at different stages. So I think we have that ecosystem, we have the possibility. And if you don't license, don't create frictions, don't introduce any new taxes or anything, and just let them operate, then I think there is somebody sitting over here who will create something.
Following up on what you said, China's, if you compare India to global economies, China's AI development is state-led. Yeah. US AI development is big tech-led. Yeah. Is there a third way that India, as we did with our digital public infrastructure in Aadhaar and UPI, is there a third way that we can do it with AI to democratize AI access?
So you could do it partly, which is there. So what happens is when you make a lot of public investments, then you are very clear about the outcomes which are there. So like when we were creating the Aadhaar, we are very clear about the outcome which is there, that we want digital identities for each individual. Similarly, when you are creating a UPI, you are very clear as to what the outcome would be like. Now in situations like that, public investment can work very well. But when you are innovating, where you are creating something new, then you require that entrepreneurship, you require that innovation which is there. Because somebody has to think about that, he also has to create a market which is there. You have to recruit people, you have to have your costs under control. So there are very many things which go into setting up of a successful venture. So you could partly do it for applications where you know what you are trying and achieving. So for example, if you want to do something on the agriculture side, or soil health or something, it's potentially possible to do that. But in a lot of the areas, public investment can't tell you what to create. If there is something which nobody has thought about, how do you tender that out? How do you get somebody to do that? So I think both the things can work. It really depends upon the particular sector, the particular application that you're looking at.
normal layman sense, the Impact Summit is a signal to the global economy that we are going big on AI. How do you see the role of AI evolving in Indian enterprises and India businesses over the next 2-3 years?
So I think there's a lot of excitement which is there about AI in India, and Indian businesses are very curious about it, and they are experimenting, and there are pilots, and there are other things which are happening. And as you look at AI globally which are there, then there are very different reports which come. There was the MIT report which came on agentic AI, which was not so favorable to AI which was there. So I think the real important thing is for people to be at the top, that's for the decision makers, to be aware of what the technology is, of what they can do, and to really push the system to see how you can leverage this. Now, this is obviously a developing technology. We have not reached the end of it. There are challenges which are there. In certain applications, you may want it to be very, very deterministic and not be so open-ended, which can happen in Gen AI and all. So I see a huge amount of positive energy which is there, of people looking at AI, of seeing how they can leverage this to drive their businesses. And I think the jury is out. We'll know, in some time.
And what do you think could the government structure tax incentives in a way that accelerates AI R&D and innovation?
So, this thing has got debated for some time. We traditionally used to have R&D incentives, and which are a part of the direct tax code. And world over, it's quite what I say, it's a popular policy tool which is used by governments to incentivize R&D. And we have moved away from that position, which is there, where the government wants a very simple direct tax code, doesn't want to have too many incentives, or too many incentives is not the right word, but for it to be very simple and for it to be very direct. And the way we are approaching the R&D is by setting up this specialist fund which is there under the Anusandhan Foundation, which is just getting started to take off, and you have a 1 lakh crores, which is the eventual target which is there. So I think, maybe to set up some VC funds or similar things to be able to provide some grants, to be able to provide some money, which is there for R&D. I think that is the way we may probably end up going, and we'll see what happens. But I think R&D is very, very high on the government agenda as of this point of time. I have not seen it as high in my 34 years of work life, I can tell you that.